steak set that makes Henrietta and Atelier smile in pure happiness. Right then, the girls ask him why he was closed the last 2 days because it's bad for new businesses like his restaurant. And he explains he had some important business. Curious, Henrietta notices that he looks a lot like her hero from behind, but before she can ask him, another customer comes in. The next morning, Henrietta keeps talking non-stop, and when she finally asks Dennis something, he replies that he did not think she was even speaking to him. After that, he smoothly changes the subject and asks what she wants to eat. She goes with sorcery ramen, and the chef quickly gets to work. While preparing the meal, he admits he was actually listening the whole time and then brings the conversation back to her question, asking why she wants to hide her gender. When Henrietta has no answer, Dennis tells her to go with whatever feels right to her and then presents the steaming bowl of sorcery ramen she ordered. Henrietta quietly takes his advice to heart and gets up from her seat. She asks to borrow the back room for a moment and quickly removes all her armor inside. When she returns, she is wearing a completely different outfit. While walking back, she thinks about how people often forget who they are. But instead of falling into that, she now understands that being herself feels much better. Even Atelier nods in approval at her new getup, which makes Henrietta blush with excitement. Henrietta then starts eating and enjoys every single bite of the food. Dennis watches her with a smile, glad to see her that excited. But he suddenly brings up a question and asks if she is looking to join a party. He reminds her that once she finishes her meal, she needs to find a job and start paying off her tab. The moment Henrietta hears that the chef is actually keeping a tab, she flips out and starts making a huge fuss. While the chaos continues, the door slides open and a shiny adventurer steps inside, calmly takes a seat, and hides behind the menu while getting ready to order. Dennis glances at the new customer and finds himself confused, unsure if the person is a handsome guy or a cute girl. When the customer asks what tastes good around here, Dennis confidently replies that everything is up to the mark. But the vague answer only makes it harder for the guests to choose. After a brief complaint, the chef recommends the Vritra Katsudon, but the customer immediately turns it down, saying he is not in the mood for rice. Henrietta jumps in with a few suggestions, starting with her favorite pasta, then moving on to kelpai udon, but nothing seems to catch the guests' interest. Watching this, Dennis grows increasingly annoyed as his patience begins to run out. Henrietta quickly steps in again, this time trying to calm the chef down by explaining that kids can be pretty indecisive sometimes. Right then, Atelier walks over to the customer and suggests going for fried rice if he really cannot make up his mind. The blue-haired guest takes the suggestion and places an order for fried rice, which makes Dennis smile as he gets back to the kitchen. He prepares the dish with his usual finesse, cooking it perfectly and topping it off with a few shrimps. The moment the customer tastes the first spoonful, he stops in awe, completely melting under the rich, delicious flavor. As the boy continues to eat, Dennis brings up what he noticed earlier and points out how the customer had entered while sighing and looking like he needed someone to talk to. The boy replies that it is nothing in particular, and Dennis tells him that it is fine if he doesn't feel like sharing. Still, the boy decides to open up and says that the real problem is with how low the level of people around him is. His words leave everyone, including Dennis, stunned as the boy gives off the vibe of someone who enjoys praising himself. The new kid then asks Dennis if he wants to hear what exactly he meant, and even though Dennis refuses, the boy starts talking anyway. He explains that the people around him have a weak mindset and only focus on being praised rather than pushing themselves to grow into a truly top-tier party. Dennis looks at Henrietta and tells her to have some shame, while Henrietta frowns and complains that the chef gets way too rude sometimes. Before they can continue, the new boy slams his hands on the table and stands up, clearly wanting everyone to hear him as he yells that he cannot stand those unmotivated adventurers and finds that kind of attitude unforgivable. He then starts bluffing again and says that when he spoke like this to his party, they kicked him out, which makes Dennis feel awkward as he wonders why his restaurant keeps attracting outcasts from everywhere. Henrietta replies that she has no idea either, but the boy just keeps talking, confidently declaring that he will soon become strong enough to join Silverwind and end up as their most powerful wizard. Dennis advises him to be careful, or he might end up alone, and once the boy finishes eating, he pays up and leaves, introducing himself as Vivia Strange and saying he will order shrimp fried rice next time. The boy shows up again for another meal and places his order right away. As usual, he keeps talking non-stop and announces that he has decided to join the strongest party around here, called the Night Mist Troupe. He boasts about having many advanced skills and claims that it will not take long before he makes it into Silver Wing. Dennis soon brings over the food, and the boy continues fantasizing about his future with Silver Wing, while Dennis quietly hopes that the kid finds a reliable party that actually helps him grow into a dependable adventurer. Dennis then asks about his first quest, and the boy explains that he is gathering taste synthesis materials from somewhere around the 5th floor. Hearing that makes Dennis a little uneasy, so he uses his search skill and finds out that the boy is only level 17. While that is quite high for his age, Dennis knows the 5th floor is meant for people at least in their mid-30s. He asks the boy if he does not think that is a bit too deep for him, but the boy confidently replies that some of the most elite members of the group will be supporting him. Dennis remembers how the boy kept bluffing earlier about knowing all kinds of advanced skills, but now he is almost sure the kid must have only read about them in books and convinced himself he could use them. A person's level reflects the number and quality of skills they possess, and if he truly had so many, his level would be much higher. Vivia then says that it only shows how much the party expects from him, though Dennis still appears concerned. The boy quickly adds that a chef like him wouldn't understand since he probably never even stepped into a dungeon, so Mr. Chef just plays along, even though the last time he went in, it was down to the 37th floor. Before leaving, the boy says he will return next time for crab fried rice. A while later, Atelier and Dennis head out for some shopping, with the adorable little girl carefully counting eggs and meat to make sure they do not forget anything. While she stays focused on the groceries, Dennis appears lost in thought and worries about Vivia, who must have reached the 5th floor by now. He wonders if it was a mistake to let the boy go, and whether he should have stopped him no matter what, but eventually shakes off the thought. Atelier tugs at his clothes and says she hopes Vivia is safe. Just then, 2 adventurers walk past them, chatting about Vivia's fate and how their captain, Hopper, had deliberately sent the boy to the 5th floor just to see if he would survive. Hearing this, Dennis immediately rushes toward them, grabs both men, and drags them into a nearby back alley before slamming them onto the ground. The adventurers pull out their weapons and introduce themselves as members of the Night Mist Troop, but despite that, they are the ones who end up getting beaten down, while Dennis walks away with the information he came for. When Dennis returns to Atelier, he apologizes and tells her that they will have to close the restaurant for the day. He finds her just as worried, and she quietly asks him to be safe. Dennis smiles at her and tells her not to worry about him at all. Meanwhile, down on the 5th floor, Vivia runs wildly through the dungeon, shouting at a group of goblins to stay away from him. The adventurers who had come with him had already left him behind, claiming it was some kind of test and that their captain, Hopper, had placed high hopes on him. Vivia panics, thinking he must at least reach the 3rd level to be safe, but in the middle of running, he trips, and suddenly vines start growing around his feet. He struggles to break free, but the vines seem to be enchanted, and magic pulses through them. He tries to cast a spell to break the magic, but his mind goes completely blank, and he cannot remember the incantation. He starts freaking out and worries that the goblins will shred him apart once they catch up. Just before they reach him, a girl shows up and saves him, cutting the vines and casting the right spell. As she pulls him to safety, Vivia looks up at her and thanks her, impressed that she knows how to use spell-breaking magic. The girl calmly tells him this isn't the time to relax and they need to find a way out. When Vivia asks if she got lost too, she explains that her party left her behind after she fell into the same trap, and no one ever came to help. Then she tells him that they should wait together in case someone comes to rescue him. But Vivia quietly admits that no one is coming for him either. As they sit and talk, the two slowly realize how alike they really are. Just then, the goblins get near, and Vivia immediately tries to act like a hero, sharing his plan to serve as a decoy so Cynthia can have time to escape. Although she protests and urges him to wait for help, he insists that he owes her his life and runs off before she can stop him. As he faces the goblins, he shouts that he wants her to be the one who lives on, and then throws himself in front of the monsters. He forces himself to stay calm, hoping Cynthia is getting away safely, and casts a defensive spell called Palm to hold the goblins back. The spell works for a moment, but the creatures eventually break through and charge toward him. Right at that moment, Dennis appears wearing a budget mask and uses one of his skills to trap the goblins inside a cooking pot. Vivia screams in shock, pointing at him and calling him a monster while repeatedly casting his palm spell out of pure panic. Dennis scolds him, and it finally hits Vivia that the masked man is Dennis. Dennis rips off the mask and asks what the point of wearing it even was before smacking Vivia on the head for pulling off a suicide stunt right in front of the goblins. As Dennis begins dragging him along, Vivia quietly mentions that there is someone else with him. He worries that Cynthia might have already run off, but Dennis says he did not see anyone on his way here. The boy points toward a nearby hollow, saying she might still be there, but when they look inside, all they find are skeletal remains of someone who had likely died a long time ago. Later at the guild, they learn that the girl was Cynthia Dread, an adventurer who got separated from her party 13 years ago on the 5th floor, and no one had heard from her since. The two of them gather her remains and bury her in a grave. Dennis says he has heard myths about fallen adventurers whose spirits sometimes appear to protect the living, and Vivia breaks down crying. He thanks her for saving him and promises that he will keep visiting her grave and one day become the #1 wizard who protects girls like her. On their way back to the restaurant, Dennis lightly smacks the boy on the back, telling him to cheer up so Cynthia can rest in peace. But Vivia just sighs and says he should at least be allowed to feel a little sad for a while.